Hi guys, this is Mike from HeavyFeet. I've been asked to answer a few questions about how I deal with tinnitus. As a music producer who sits in the studio for 5 or 6 days a week making electronic dance music, it can be a bit of a pain. It's not something that I suffer with on a permanent basis. It's a sort of sporadic tinnitus that I have. I generally pops up 3 or 4 times a week, but it can be more regular, depending usually on the levels of audio that I'm surrounded by. That tends to instigate more of these short, sharp bursts of tinnitus that I get. And the sound of the tinnitus that I get is like a very, very high-pitched mechanical noise. A little like if you have a cheap electronic device, be it a shaver or a hairdryer or something like so. Often when you plug it in just as it's starting to charge, you'll get a very high-pitched noise. It's almost inaudible, but it's a very, very high-pitched noise, almost off the frequency chart, and it's the sort of sound a dog would hate. But that's the sort of sound that I get. It's very, very high-pitched, as I say. It's quite hard to deal with. It usually appears for around about 30 seconds to a minute, and then sort of fades out, if you like, after so. It's generally a lot worse after I've been to a club, if I've been working, if I've been DJing. Unfortunately, that's the way, and hearing specialists have told me previously you need to avoid going to nightclubs, and generally, on the whole, unfortunately, these days I have to, except generally when I'm working. And when I am working, I've always got in a pair of ER25s, which are custom moulded earplugs, which have a minus 25 decibel audio reduction, which massively help to keep overexposure of music at a reduced rate, if you like. Generally how I've dealt with tinnitus over the last few years, and I think I've probably had it sort of for the last 5 or 6 years, I would have said, is by accepting I've got it, essentially. It's not something that you can really sit around with a mope about and get too upset about, especially as a musician, as somebody who has to be in the studio as much as we do. You just got to get on with it, as I say, and unfortunately you do everything in your power to ensure that it doesn't progress into a worse state. And generally that would be always take your earplugs out with you and try and minimise the exposure of loud music at all times where possible. Not wearing earphones when I'm travelling around at a very loud volume. I try and keep it under half the volume, for example, on my iPhone. Try and keep it under that, and just generally trying to be conscious of the environment that you work in. So, for example, I work in a studio, obviously prone to a lot of loud noise, and generally we try and keep the levels down throughout the day, and just crank it when we need to for the purposes of that exercise, really, which is usually for us only on the mix down stage. I have been to see doctors. I have been to see ear, nose and throat departments at hospitals. I've had frequency tests. This is where they play you through a pair of headphones a series of different frequencies at different volumes, and they determine where your weak spots are in your hearing and where some damage may have been caused. And I have a right ear issue with mid-range frequencies. And that, unfortunately, isn't helped by being in nightclubs and DJing, etc. But as I say, I have to deal with that. And earplugs, generally, from my experience, is the best way of dealing with that. My experience of dealing with doctors and hospital departments hasn't been particularly amazing in that respect, but it's been everybody I've spoken to has been helpful. But generally, I think that this is a fairly perhaps underdiagnosed condition of the ear, tinnitus, really, in young people especially. Generally, as I say, most people are helpful, but unfortunately you don't tend to gain a huge amount of sympathy from people, because I think it's largely looked upon as you should have known what you were doing, exposing yourself to that level of audio perhaps so frequently every weekend or whatever it may have been. So it's sort of self-inflicted. So as I say, there's not a huge amount of sympathy out there for people with tinnitus, and that is unfortunate to a degree, but also people should be a little more aware of the damage that you are doing to your ears through, overexposure to very loud music. So as I say, Get some earplugs. You can get earplugs for free from Action on Hearing Loss on their website, as I'm aware. If not, get some custom moulded earplugs like myself. Try not to wear your earphones too loud when you're travelling around, and just generally try and avoid excessive loud noise.